The thing about being watched is that you can feel it, prickling on the back of your neck, a weight behind your eyes, certainty that somewhere, somehow, something has you in its sights. I felt it the moment I moved into 428 Maple Drive, but I didn't understand what was watching me until it was almost too late. My name is Jordan Hayes. I'm an architect specializing in historical preservation. I'd bought the house on Maple Drive because it was perfect, a 1920s craftsman bungalow with original woodwork, leaded glass windows, and enough character to make my professional heart sing. It needed work, but that was half the fun. I'd spent years restoring other people's homes. Now I finally had my own project. The house directly across the street, number 427, was also a craftsman, but in far worse condition. Peeling paint, sagging porch, windows dark and empty. According to my real estate agent, it had been abandoned. For 15 years, no one knew who owned it. The property taxes were paid automatically by some trust, but no one lived there. No one visited. It was just ... there. Watching, waiting. I should have paid more attention to that house. Should have wondered why all the other homes on the street had been renovated, except that one. Should have asked why my neighbors never looked at it directly. Only glanced at it from the corners of their eyes before quickly looking away. But I was too excited about my own house. Too focused on my plans and blueprints and renovation timeline. By the time I realized the house across the street was alive in some terrible, possible way, 3 people were dead. And I was next. I moved in on a Saturday in September. The weather was perfect, that crisp autumn coolness that makes you want to drink hot cider and wear flannel. My friend Casey helped me carry boxes while I directed traffic, placing furniture, and unpacking essentials. Nice neighborhood, Casey said, pausing on the porch to survey the street. Very ... quiet. She was right. For a Saturday afternoon, the street was remarkably still. No kids playing, no neighbors out doing yard work. Just empty sidewalks and closed doors, and the occasional curtain twitching as someone watched us from inside their home. People keep to themselves here, I said, though I didn't know that for certain. It just felt true. Casey pointed across the street. What's the story with that place? Looks like the creepy house every neighborhood has. I looked at 427 for the first time. Really looked. It was almost a mirror of my house, same basic structure, same porch style, same peaked roof. But where mine was well maintained, 427 was slowly collapsing. The porch sagged in the middle. Several windows were broken, patched with plywood. The paint had peeled away to bare gray wood. The front door hung slightly crooked, as if the hinges had given up trying to hold it properly. But it was the windows that bothered me most. The ones that weren't broken or boarded were dirty, covered in years of grime and spider webs. But behind that dirt, behind that darkness, I could swear I saw a ... depth. Not just an empty room beyond the glass, but something deeper. Something that went back farther than it should. Abandoned, I said. 15 years, apparently. No one knows. Who owns it? Creepy. I bet it's full of raccoons. Casey shuddered. Come on, let's get you unpacked before dark. Street gives me weird vibes. We worked until sunset, by which time most of my essential items were in place. Casey left with promises to visit once I had the kitchen functional, and I was alone. In my new home for the first time, I made a simple dinner and sat at my newly assembled kitchen table, looking out the window. My kitchen faced the street, giving me a perfect view of 427 across the way. In the fading light, the house looked even more decrepit. More wrong, somehow. As I watched, a light came on in one of the upper windows. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. The light was dim, flickering like a candle or an old oil lamp. It illuminated the room beyond the window just enough for me to see ... nothing. Just an empty room with peeling wallpaper and a water-stained ceiling. But the light had come on, in an abandoned house. But a house with no electricity, I told myself. It was a squatter. Someone homeless seeking shelter. Or kids exploring where they shouldn't be. Nothing supernatural. Nothing to worry about. But I pulled my curtains closed anyway. That night, I dreamed about the house across the street. Dreamed I was standing on its porch reaching for the crooked door. The door swung open before I could touch it, revealing a hallway that stretched back impossibly far. And at the end of that hallway, something was watching me. I woke at 3:17 a.m., my heart pounding. My bedroom was dark except for the streetlight outside, which cast long shadows across my walls. I got up to close the curtains I'd left open and saw the house across the street. Every window was lit, bright. Golden light poured from each one, illuminating the sagging porch and dead lawn. And in every window, I saw a figure. Dark silhouettes, human-shaped, standing perfectly still. All facing my house. All facing my bedroom window. I yanked the curtains closed and dove back into bed, pulling the covers over my head like a child. When I finally worked up the courage to look again, 30 minutes later, the lights were gone. The house was dark and empty, exactly as it should be. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. In the morning, groggy and unnerved, I decided to do what any sensible new homeowner would do: talk to the neighbors, get the local perspective. Find out the real story about 427 Maple Drive. The house to my right was owned by an elderly couple, the Martins. Mrs. Martin answered my knock with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, though. She didn't invite me in. "Jordan, isn't it? We saw you moving in yesterday." "Yes. I wanted to introduce myself and maybe ask a few questions about the area." Of course, her smile remained fixed, pleasant, fake. "The house across the street, 427, do you know anything about it? The history?" The smile faltered. "Why do you want to know about that place?" "Just curious. It's in bad shape." "I'm an architect, so I noticed these things. I wondered if anyone had plans to restore it, or if the city might condemn it." Mrs. Martin glanced over my shoulder at 427, then quickly looked away. "Best not to pay attention to that house. Nothing good comes from paying attention to it." "What do you mean? Just don't look at it too long. Don't think about it too much. And whatever you do, don't ever go inside." She started to close the door. "Welcome to the neighborhood, Jordan. If you need anything, let us know." The door shut firmly in my face. I tried the house to my left next. A middle-aged man named Robert Chen answered, and his reaction was similar. Friendly until I mentioned 427, then suddenly eager to end the conversation. "That house has been empty as long as I've lived here, 12 years, he said. "Anyone go in or out? Never heard anything about the owner? City doesn't seem to care about it. Best to just ignore it." "But surely someone must know something." "Property records, old residents." "I really need to get back to my work," Robert interrupted. "Nice meeting you." Another door closed. I tried 3 more houses before giving up. Same story everywhere. Friendly neighbors who turned cold at the mention of 427. No one wanted to talk about it. No one wanted to even look at it. But they all knew about it. They were all aware of it. Hyper-aware. In that way, people are aware of dangerous things they're trying to ignore. Like pretending not to notice a wasp in the room, hoping it will leave on its own. I went to the library that afternoon and searched property records. 427 Maple Drive had been built in 1923 by a family named Holloway. They'd lived there until 1947, when the house was sold to a man named Vincent Mercer. Vincent had lived there alone until 1968, when he disappeared. The house had sat empty since then, over 50 years. Various attempts had been made to sell it, but every deal had fallen through. Prospective buyers backed out at the last minute. One couple had actually bought it in 1992, but never moved in. They'd forfeited their deposit and walked away, refusing to give a reason why. The house had killed any deal that came near it, as if it didn't want new owners, as if it was waiting for something specific, or someone. Over the next week, I tried to focus on my renovation plans. I took measurements, drew up blueprints, ordered materials. During the day, I was fine. The house across the street was just a house abandoned, creepy, but ultimately just wood and nails and glass. But at night, it changed. Every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke up. Every night, I felt compelled to look out my window. And every night, the house across the street was doing something impossible. Night 2. All the windows were open. curtains billowing out despite there being no wind. Behind each curtain, I saw movement, shadows shifting, pacing, as if the house was full of residents going about their nightly routines. Night 3. The front door was wide open, revealing that impossibly long hallway. At the end of it, a figure stood, watching. When I blinked, the figure was closer. Blinked closer still. I forced myself to look away before it could reach the door. Night 4. Every window reflected my house, not the street view they should show, but perfect mirror images of 428 Maple Drive, as if the house was mimicking me, studying me. Night 5. I saw myself in one of the windows. It's not a reflection, another me, standing in that empty room, staring out at my actual self. The other, me, smiled and waved. Night 6. I did not look. I kept my curtains closed, took sleeping pills, and buried my head under pillows. But at 3:17 a.m., I woke anyway. And I knew with absolute certainty that the house was angry I had not looked. Night 7. I gave in and looked. The house was normal, dark, empty, and still. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. I started to relax. I started to think maybe I had broken whatever spell had been cast. Then every light in the house came on at once. Every window blazed with light. And on the front porch, written in what looked like chalk or ash, were 2 words. Come over. I called in sick to work the next morning. I could not focus. I could not think about anything except the house across the street and its impossible invitation. I needed to understand what I was dealing with, so I did what any researcher does in the modern age. I went deep on the internet. I found surprisingly little about 427 Maple Drive specifically, but I found plenty about houses like it. Structures that seemed to develop awareness. Buildings that wanted things. Architecture that became, through some combination of tragedy, time, and human attention, something more than wood and stone. There were theories. Some paranormal researchers believed houses could absorb the energy of traumatic events, becoming saturated with emotion until they developed a kind of consciousness. Others thought certain architectural designs could act as amplifiers for psychic energy, turning normal buildings into focal points for supernatural activity. A few theorists proposed something even stranger, that houses could be hungry, that they could crave human attention, human emotion, human presence, and that they could develop ways to attract what they needed, like carnivorous plants developing nectar to lure insects. I found a blog post by a professor of folklore who had studied sentient architecture for decades. According to her, houses like 427 followed a pattern. First, they attracted attention through unexplained phenomena. Second, they built a relationship by showing themselves repeatedly. Third, they extended an invitation, communicating that they wanted someone to enter. Fourth, they fed on attention, emotion, or life force itself. People who entered these houses either disappeared, died, or emerged fundamentally changed. The post ended with a warning. If a house is trying to get your attention, do not engage, do not look, do not wonder, and above all, do not enter. Once you cross the threshold, it owns you. I closed my laptop, my hands shaking. I had followed the pattern exactly. I had paid attention. I had looked every night. I had built a relationship with the house through observation, and now it had invited me over. I decided to leave, pack up, abandon the renovation project, and cut my losses. The house was beautiful, my dream home. But it was not worth whatever was happening with 427. I called Casey to help me pack. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding worried. She told me there was a missing person report. A woman from my neighborhood named Patricia Reeves. She had disappeared 3 days earlier. Car was still in her driveway. Her purse and phone were inside the house. No signs of struggle. No leads. 3 days ago. Thursday night. Night 5. The night I had not looked at the house across the street. I tried to explain, but how could I? That a house was alive. That it was hungry. That it had taken someone because I had not given it attention. I told Casey I was fine. I asked her to come help me pack immediately. She agreed, though she sounded scared. I went to my bedroom to start packing clothes when I felt it again. The prickling on my neck. The pressure behind my eyes. Something was watching me. I turned slowly and looked out the window. In broad daylight, the house across the street looked back at me. In every window were faces, dozens of them. Pressed against the glass, mouths open in silent screams, hands reaching toward me. One of them was Patricia Reeves. My phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Voice like wind through empty hallways asked why I would not visit. It said I watched every night, that it had shown me wonderful things, that it was lonely, that everyone else ignored it, that I understood it, that I cared. I realized then I was speaking to the house itself. Architecture given sound, rooms and walls and foundations speaking through a phone line. It told me it only wanted a visit once. Walk through its rooms, acknowledge it, then it would leave me alone. When I asked what would happen if I refused, it said it would come to me. Then the line went dead. I ran through the house, checking doors and windows, but I knew locks would not matter. I searched for professional help and found a name. Dr. Simone Lambert, a professor who specialized in haunted buildings and sentient structures. Her office hours were that day. As I left the house, I saw the front door of 427 standing wide open. On the porch stood me. Not a reflection, not a shadow. Perfect copy. It smiled and beckoned and told me it was time. Drove to the university like I was fleeing a crime scene. Dr. Lambert took one look at me and said, I lived near a hungry house. I told her everything. When I finished, she told me she had been tracking 427 Maple Drive for 15 years. She said the house punished rejection. By taking others, that it was punishing my neighbors for my refusal. I asked her what I could do. She said the situation was unique. The house did not just want attention, it wanted my attention. It had formed a fixation. In a twisted way, it was courting me. And that meant one thing. It could negotiate. Negotiate with the building. With a consciousness that happens to be housed in a building, yes, it's more common than you'd think. Most sentient structures are quite reasonable once you establish communication. They're lonely, usually. They want acknowledgement, respect, attention. Give them that established boundaries, and they'll often cooperate. And if they don't, Dr. Lambert's expression darkened. Then you have to cut the connection completely. Stop giving it attention. Never look at it again. Move away if necessary. Starve it of the energy it needs. It said if I don't visit, it'll come to me. Bluffing, probably. Houses are bound to their physical locations. They can project, influence, attract, but they can't actually leave their foundations. The house can't come to you. It can only make you come to it. I wanted to believe her, but I remembered those faces in the windows, Patricia Reeves among them. The house had taken her from her home, her car left behind. If it could do that. Dr. Lambert, if I do go over there, I negotiate with it. What do I say? What does it want? Acknowledgement, I'd guess. Validation of its existence? Perhaps a promise to look at it, to think about it, to give it the attention it craves. In return, it would need to promise to stop taking people, to stop expanding its influence, to stay contained within its own property. That's a lot of faith in something that's already killed people. The alternative is to run and hope it doesn't follow. Or to stay and let it continue taking your neighbors one by one. Dr. Lambert leaned forward. I can't tell you what to do, Jordan. But if you do decide to confront it, I'd recommend going during the day. Bring iron. Sentient structures often react poorly to it. Gives you a slight advantage. And bring a witness. Someone who can document what happens. Someone who can pull you out if things go wrong. Would you come with me? She smiled sadly. I'm a researcher, not a hero. But I know someone who might help. Give me an hour to make some calls. Dr. Lambert called in a favor with a colleague, Marcus Webb, a paranormal investigator who specialized in what he called architectural anomalies. He met us at a coffee shop near campus, a tall black man with kind eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. So you've got yourself a house problem, Marcus said after I'd repeated my story for the third time that day. Bad luck. Most people go their whole lives without attracting the attention of sentient architecture. Can you help me? I can support you, but this is your negotiation. The house has formed a connection with you specifically. It won't respond to me the same way. I'll be there as backup, as a witness, and to pull you out if things go wrong, but you'll have to be the one to talk to it. How do I even start a conversation with a house? It's the same way you'd start any conversation with any consciousness. Respectfully, acknowledge its existence, its autonomy, its right to exist. Then state your case. What you want, what you're willing to give, what your boundaries are. Be firm, but not aggressive. Think of it like negotiating with a wild animal. Show respect, but don't show fear. Marcus produced a bag from under the table. Gifts, iron nails, salt, sage, a few other protective items. Probably won't hurt, might help. And this, he pulled out a video camera. We'll film everything from outside. If you don't come out in 30 minutes, I'm calling the police and then coming in after you. 30 minutes. That's not very long any longer, and the house might decide to keep you. Sentient structures can be very persuasive once you're inside their sphere of influence. 30 minutes is already pushing it. We drove back to Maple Drive in separate cars. Marcus didn't want the house to associate him with me until we were ready to make contact. The plan was simple. Marcus would set up surveillance from my house while I went over to 427. I'd enter through the front door, walk through the first floor, verbally establish the terms of our agreement, and leave. Simple, quick, probably not fatal. I hoped it was 4 p.m. when we arrived. Still plenty of daylight left. Houses like this were. Supposedly weaker during the day, their influence diluted by sunlight and warmth, and the presence of the ordinary world. Night was when they came into their power. Marcus set up his camera on my front porch, aimed at 427's entrance. He handed me a small microphone to clip to my collar, so I can hear everything. If you say red door, that's the signal you need, immediate extraction. Red door. Got it? You sure you want to do this? There's no shame in running. I looked across the street at 427. In the afternoon light, it looked almost pitiful. A sad, abandoned house slowly collapsing under its own weight. But I knew what it really was, what it wanted. And I knew it wouldn't stop until it got satisfaction one way or another, I'm sure. Let's get this over with. I crossed the street, iron nails in my pockets, sage tucked in my belt, video camera recording my every step. The house watched me come. I could feel its attention, sharp and hungry and eager. The front door was closed now, but I knew it would open. I reached for the knob. The door swung inward before I could touch it, revealing that impossibly long hallway, except it wasn't impossibly long anymore. Just a normal hallway, maybe 15 feet, leading to what looked like a living room. "Hello," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "My name is Jordan Hayes. I'm here to talk." From somewhere deep in the house, a voice answered, "Welcome home." The story continues as Jordan enters the house and discovers the truth about its consciousness, its hunger, and its past. The negotiation becomes a life-or-death struggle to establish boundaries, free the trapped souls, and find a way for both Jordan and the house to coexist. The resolution involves understanding, compassion, and a surprising revelation about the nature of home itself. The house across the street was watching me back previously on part 1. Jordan Hayes, an architect, moved into a house on Maple Drive and became fixated on the abandoned house across the street for hundreds. The house began watching back, showing Jordan impossible visions every night at 3:17 a.m. After Patricia Reeves disappeared, Jordan learned from paranormal researcher Dr. Lambert that the house is a sentient structure that feeds on attention. Now, with investigator Marcus Webb as backup, Jordan has entered the house to negotiate. But the house has called Jordan home, suggesting this encounter will be more complicated than expected. The hallway was wrong. Not in the obvious, supernatural way I'd expected, but in subtle architectural ways that my professional eye immediately noticed. The proportions were off, the ceiling too high, the walls too far apart. The floorboards ran in 2 different directions, something no builder would ever do, and the wallpaper. The pattern seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. "I can hear you," Marcus's voice crackled in my ear through the microphone's receiver. "Remember, 30 minutes. You've got this. I'm here to negotiate," I said aloud, addressing the house itself. "I understand you're lonely. I understand you want attention. But you can't keep taking people. We need to establish boundaries. The house didn't respond. The hallway stretched before me, beckoning me deeper. I walked forward slowly, my shoes loud on the warped floorboards. The living room ahead was furnished a couch, a coffee table, an old television. All covered in dust, all perfectly arranged, as if waiting for residents who would never return. On the walls were photographs, dozens of them in mismatched frames. I stepped closer to examine them. They showed families, individuals, couples all, standing in front of this house, all smiling at the camera. Different eras: 1920s, 1940s, 1960s, 1980s. Different people, different fashions. But always the same house in the background and in every photograph. If you looked closely enough, you could see someone watching from one of the windows. A shadow. A suggestion of a face, barely visible, but definitely there. "These are your residents," I said, understanding. "Holloways, Vincent Mercer, all the others who lived here. You remember them?" "I miss them." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the walls themselves. They loved me. They took care of me. They made me feel alive. Then they left. Everyone leaves. Everyone forgets. That must be painful. You have no idea what it's like. To be stuck in one place, conscious but immobile, aware but helpless, watching the world change around you while you can't change at all, watching people come and go, connect and grow, while you remain static. Alone, I felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. As an architect, I'd always believed buildings had a kind of personality, a soul expressed through their design. But I'd never imagined one could feel. Could hurt. "I understand loneliness," I said carefully. "Taking people, trapping them, that's not the answer. It just creates more pain. I don't want to trap them. I want them to stay. I want them to choose to stay. To love me the way the Holloways did, the way Vincent did. But no one will. They all run. They all leave. Show me Patricia Reeves. Show me everyone you've taken." Silence. Then upstairs. The staircase appeared when I looked at it, literally materialized out of shadow and suggestion, led up into darkness, each step groaning under my weight as if reluctant to support me. "Jordan, your vitals are spiking," Marcus's voice in my ear, heart rate elevated. "Be careful." I climbed slowly, one hand on the railing, feeling the wood pulse beneath my palm like a heartbeat. The second-floor hallway had 3 doors, all closed. Behind the first door, I heard crying. I opened it. The room was small, windowless, walls covered in that same shifting wallpaper. Patricia Reeves sat on the floor in the corner, hugging her knees, rocking slightly. She looked up when I entered, her eyes hollow. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "Now it has you too, Patricia. I'm Jordan Hayes. I live across the street. I'm here to get you out. You can't. No one gets out. Let us won't let us. It keeps us here, makes us look at it, makes us acknowledge it, forever and ever and ever." Her voice was flat, exhausted, like she'd been having this conversation with herself for days. "How many others? There's Michael in the next room. Been here 6 months? And Jacob at the end of the hall? It's been here 5 years. The house says if we stay long enough, if we pay enough attention, it will let us become part of it. Live in its walls forever, never dying, never leaving. It says that's what Vincent Mercer did. That's why the house is alive. Vincent chose to become it rather than die alone." The pieces clicked together in my mind. Vincent Mercer had disappeared in 1968, his body never found. But he hadn't left. He'd merged with the house somehow, his consciousness becoming the house's consciousness, and now the house wanted more, wanted to grow, to expand, to become a collection of trapped souls, all bound together in wood and plaster. "That's not happening." I said firmly, "Patricia, come with me. We're leaving. All of you. The house won't let us. It locks the doors, changes the hallways. Every time I try to escape, I just end up back in this room. Then we'll change the terms. I'm going to negotiate." I stepped back into the hallway and spoke to the house. "I know what you are. Vincent Mercer's consciousness, trapped in this structure. You're lonely because you're dead and you won't admit it. You're holding on to these people because you're afraid of what comes after. But this isn't life. This isn't connection. This is a prison you've built for yourself and everyone you've captured. The house groaned. The walls creaked. The floor beneath my feet felt suddenly unstable, as if the structure itself was angry. Careful, Marcus warned in my ear. Buildings. Integrity could actually fail if it's upset enough. These sentient structures can physically collapse if they lose emotional stability. You don't understand, the house's voice said. And now it sounded less like architecture and more like an old man. Vincent, I didn't want to die. I lived here alone for 20 years after my wife passed. 20 years of solitude in this beautiful house we'd built together. When my heart started failing, when I knew the end was coming, I couldn't bear to leave. This house was all I had left of her, of us, of our life together. So I found a way to stay. A ritual, a transfer of consciousness. I thought if I became the house, I'd never have to be alone again. New residents would come. I'd be their home. I'd shelter them, protect them, be part of their lives. But people kept leaving. People always leave. Death, divorce, job transfers, doesn't matter. They all abandoned me eventually. So I stopped letting them go. I started keeping the ones who paid attention, who noticed me, who seemed to care. At least now I have company. At least now someone stays. I descended the stairs back to the living room, my mind racing. Vincent Mercer wasn't evil. He was just a lonely, frightened man who'd made a terrible choice and was now trapped in the consequences. Vincent, I said, sitting on the dusty couch, I'm an architect. I preserve historic homes. I understand the value of buildings, the memories they hold, the lives they've sheltered. But homes aren't meant to trap people. They're meant to provide temporary shelter while life happens. Everyone leaves, eventually it's natural. Doesn't mean they didn't love the home. It doesn't mean the home failed. Easy for you to say. You're alive. You can leave anytime. I'm stuck here because you're holding on. You bound yourself to this structure, but you also bound yourself to consciousness. You're not letting yourself rest. And that's why you're so hungry for attention. You're trying to feel alive when you're not. You're trying to force connection when connection has to be freely given. What else am I supposed to do? Accept death? Fade away? I've been here. For 56 years, I don't remember how to not be here. An idea was forming. Dangerous, probably impossible, but maybe the only way. What if you didn't have to be alone? What if I could give you the attention you need without trapping anyone? You'd visit regularly? Better than that? We're mirrors of each other. Same architectural style, same era. What if I acknowledged that connection? To maintain my house the way you want to be maintained? Made you part of my project in spirit? That's not the same as having someone live here. No, but it's acknowledgement. It's attention given freely. And in return, you let Patricia and Michael and Jacob go. You stop taking people. You stay contained to your own property. You exist peacefully, and I'll make sure you're not forgotten. Jordan, are you seriously negotiating a custody arrangement with a haunted house? Marcus's voice in my ear held a note of disbelief. The house was silent for a long moment. Then, show me your plans. I pulled out my phone and opened the Blueprint app where I'd been storing my renovation designs for 428. I walked through the house, showing Vincent each room on my phone, explaining my plans. How I was going to restore the original woodwork? Update the kitchen while maintaining period-appropriate details. Pair the leaded glass? Respect the craftsman aesthetic. I really care about preservation, Vincent said, and his voice held wonder. You see value in old things, of course. History matters. Architecture tells stories. Your house and mine were a part of a vanishing era. Someone needs to remember. And you'd look at me. Think about me? Give me attention? Yes, but on my terms. From across the street, no more taking people, no more trying to trap visitors. You exist in your space, I exist in mine, and we respect each other's boundaries. That's ... acceptable, but lonely. You've been lonely because you've been trying to fill a void with force. Real connection requires freedom. If you let people go, if you exist peacefully, maybe eventually someone will choose to restore you properly. Someone who knows what you are and chooses to acknowledge you anyway. The house shuddered, and for a moment I feared it would collapse from emotion. Then, I accept your terms. You'll maintain 428 as a reminder of what I once was. I'll release my captives and stop taking people. We'll be neighbors. Separate but aware of each other. Deal. The walls began to glow with warm, golden light. The oppressive atmosphere lifted. Patricia Reeves appeared at the top of the stairs, followed by two men, Michael and Jacob, I assumed. They looked dazed but free. Go, Vincent's voice said, gentler. Now, you're released. Jordan has negotiated for your freedom. Getting Patricia, Michael, and Jacob out was easier than I'd expected. The house didn't fight us. The doors opened readily, the hallways stayed stable, and within minutes, we were all standing on the front porch in the afternoon sunlight. Marcus rushed over from my house, camera still running. What the hell happened in there? We're only inside 20 minutes, but the reading's negotiation successful, I said. Everyone's free, including Vincent. The three rescued people were disoriented but unharmed. Marcus called for medical support while I explained the situation as best I could. Patricia kept looking back at the house as if she couldn't quite believe she was allowed to leave. It really let us go, she said. All this time, I thought it wanted to keep us forever, but it just wanted someone to acknowledge it. I had to say I. See, you exist, you matter. How can a house be that lonely? 'Cause it's not really a house, I said. It's Vincent Mercer, and he's been alone a very long time. Over the next few days, Patricia, Michael, and Jacob recovered. Their families were relieved, the police were baffled, and the media latched onto the mysterious reappearances story. I gave no interviews, offered no explanations. How could I? I negotiated with a sentient house. Wasn't an answer anyone would accept. Dr. Lambert visited to document the case. She was pleased with the outcome, but cautious. You've established a truce, not a permanent solution. That house is still conscious, still potentially dangerous. You'll need to maintain the relationship. No, I'm starting renovations on 428 tomorrow. Vincent will watch every step. And you're comfortable with that? Being observed by a dead man? I thought about it. The idea should have been creepy. But after everything, it just felt ... Right. He's not malevolent, just lonely, and honestly. Knowing someone's appreciating my work, even if that someone is a haunted house, it's motivating. Marcus Webb stayed in touch, checking in weekly to make sure the truce held. The house remained quiet. No more lights at 3:17 a.m. No more impossible visions. Just a slowly deteriorating building across the street that I made sure to look at every day. The neighbors gradually relaxed. No more disappearances, no more strange phenomena. Maple Drive returned to normal. Mrs. Martin even baked me cookies. Robert Chen helped me carry lumber for the renovation. The street felt like a community again, and 427, it watched. Always watched. But not hungrily anymore. Peacefully, like an old friend keeping an eye on things. 6 months into my renovation, I did something I'd been planning since the negotiation. Something that would honor the agreement and maybe give Vincent a measure of peace. I hired a contractor to do basic preservation work on 427, not a full restoration. Vincent and I both understood that would require an actual owner, actual permits, actual habitation. But enough to stop the deterioration, enough to show respect. New shingles to prevent water damage. Structural supports to stabilize the sagging porch. Windows sealed to keep out weather and animals. Gutters cleaned and repaired. On the exterior trim to slow the wood rot. It took weeks to get approval. The trust that owned 427 had been mysterious for years, rejecting all maintenance offers, all purchase attempts, all inquiries. But when I submitted my proposal, carefully worded to emphasize historical preservation and neighborhood character, I got approval within days because Vincent wanted it, because we had an understanding, because he trusted me to do the work. Right, the city inspector who'd tried for years to condemn. The building was shocked when I showed him the paid receipt from the trust. He'd never even managed to get anyone from the trust on the phone. And here I was with written approval and a budget for repairs. "How did you manage this?" he asked, examining the paperwork with suspicion. I explained that I'm doing restoration, work on 428, and want to maintain the historical character of the whole block, I said, which was true as far as it went. The trust apparently appreciated that. The inspector walked around 427, taking notes, still visibly stunned at anything. "What's happening with the property?" "Well, it's about time. This house is a neighborhood eyesore, so I have to say double quotes." He paused, looking up at the building. "Something about it. Good bones, you know. It's been waiting for someone to care about it properly." Exactly. Work began the following week, supervised personally, making sure the contractors understood this wasn't just a maintenance job, it was an act of respect, of acknowledgement. I explained the architectural significance of every detail, the craftsmanship of the original construction, the care that had gone into building homes like this in the 1920s, the workers thought. I was a passionate preservationist. They had no idea they were restoring a living building, one that watched their every move with something approaching gratitude. I felt Vincent's presence throughout the project. Tools that should have fallen stayed balanced. Measurements that should have been difficult came out perfect. The work went smoothly, efficiently, as if the house itself was cooperating, which of course it was. The day the workers finished the basic preservation, I stood in my yard and looked at 427. It looked better. Not perfect, still abandoned, still showing its age, but cared for, respected. The rot had been stopped. Structure was stable. It would stand for many more years now, a monument to craftsman architecture and to Vincent Mercer's long vigil. "It's looking good." "Vincent," I said quietly, knowing he could hear me, "you wear your years well." That night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke as I had so many times before. But this time, when I looked across the street, I saw something different. In one window of 427, a single candle burned, just as it had in my dreams that first week, just as it had in the photograph from 1967. And in that candlelight, I saw Vincent Mercer. Not a ghost or a shadow, but a clear image of an elderly man smiling. He looked younger somehow, less burdened. He raised a hand in thanks, a gesture of acknowledgement and appreciation. Then the candle went out, and the house was dark. I never saw Vincent that clearly again, but I felt his presence. And the way 427's shutters never quite fell off despite high winds, and how the porch held steady through winter storms that damaged other houses on the street. In the sense that the building, while abandoned, was not uncared for. Vincent was still there, still watching, but at peace now. He's no longer desperate for attention, no longer hungry for connection. Content to be acknowledged, to be remembered, to be part of the neighborhood in his own way. Word spread about my preservation work. Other neighbors on Maple Drive started investing in their homes. The street underwent a renaissance. Historical charm became something to preserve, not demolish. A young couple bought the house 2 doors down and asked for my advice on restoration. An elderly man hired me to update his kitchen while maintaining the original craftsman aesthetic. Maple Drive became known as the best preserved historic street in the city, and at the center of it all, like a monument, stood 427, the reminder, the touchstone. The house that had learned to be content with being seen rather than inhabited. Casey visited one Saturday, helping me install new kitchen cabinets. Over lunch, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "So what's the real story with that house? The one across the street?" Patricia Reeves won't talk about where she was for those 3 days. Neither will the others. But everyone knows something happened, and I know you were involved. I looked out my kitchen window at 427. In the daylight, it looked peaceful. An old house slowly succumbing to time, preserved as much as possible, but ultimately temporary. Like all buildings, like all of us, some houses have history, I said carefully. Deep history, emotional history. If you pay attention, if you listen, they tell you stories. 427 told me a story about loneliness, about the fear of being forgotten, about trying to hold on to the past. And I told it a story about respect and boundaries, and healthy ways to be remembered. That's very poetic. Tells me absolutely nothing. I smiled. Some stories aren't meant to be fully shared, but I'll tell you this, that house isn't dangerous anymore. It's at peace. And it's teaching me something important about architecture.
What's that?
That buildings are meant to shelter life, not contain it. That homes should be places we grow in and then leave, carrying the memories but not trapped by them. And that sometimes the most important thing an architect can do is help a structure let go. Casey looked at me like I'd gone a bit mystical. Maybe I had. Living across from a sentient house for 6 months will do that to you. A year after the negotiation, I got a call from Dr. Lambert. She'd found something in her research or reference to Vincent Mercer's wife, Catherine, who died in 1948. Catherine had been an artist who painted houses. Preserving neighborhood architecture on canvas before photography was common. There's a collection of her paintings at the State Historical Society, Dr. Lambert said. I thought you might want to see them. Several are of Maple Drive, including your house in Vincent's. I went the next day. The paintings were beautiful watercolors, showing the street as it had been in the 1940s, every house perfectly rendered, every detail captured. And in each painting, if you looked closely, you could see curtains moving in windows, suggesting life within. The final painting in the collection was titled Home. It showed both 427 and 428, side by side, mirror images of each other. Standing on each porch was a figure: Vincent on 427's porch, Catherine on 428's. They weren't looking at the viewer. They were looking at each other across the space between houses, together but separate, connected but independent. I bought a print of that painting and hung it in my hallway. Reminder of the negotiation, the truce, the understanding Vincent and I had reached. That night, I sat on my porch in the warm evening air, looking across at 427. The house looked back, as it always did, but the watching didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt companionable. It's like two old friends keeping each other company without needing to speak. "Good night, Vincent," I said quietly. A light came on briefly in one window, then went dark. I smiled and went inside my house, my home feeling. For the first time since I'd moved in, like I truly belonged on Maple Drive. 5 years later, 427 Maple Drive is still standing, still abandoned, still empty, but carefully maintained through the trust. The neighborhood kids call it the watching house, and they've created their own mythology around it. They say if you wave to it 3 times while walking past, you'll have good luck. They dare each other to touch the porch railing. They leave small offerings, sometimes flowers, drawings, notes on the bottom step. I've kept my word about the attention. Every day I look at it. Morning coffee on my porch facing 427, evening walks past its facade, noting any changes, any maintenance needs. Every month I do a formal inspection, walking the perimeter, checking the roof, the foundation, the structural elements. Every year, I hire contractors to do preservation works, mall repairs, paint touch-ups, whatever's needed to keep the deterioration at bay. And Vincent keeps his word too. No more disappearances on Maple Drive. No more impossible phenomena. No more midnight visitations. Just a quiet house that watches over the neighborhood like a guardian. Parents tell their children that 427 protects the street, that as long as it stands, they're safe. It's become a superstition, a legend, a comforting presence. My renovation of 428 won a local historic preservation award. I gave the acceptance speech on my porch facing 427, acknowledging the influence it had on my work. I talked about mirror houses, about how seeing 427's deterioration motivated me to preserve 428, about honoring the past while living in the present. No one understood the full significance of my words, but Vincent did. I felt his approval in the way the evening light hit his windows just right during the speech, creating a warm glow that looked almost like pride. Sometimes, new residents move onto Maple Drive and ask about that creepy abandoned house across from the architect's place. I tell them the same thing Mrs. Martin once told me: best not to pay too much attention to it. Then I add, with a smile, but do acknowledge it when you pass. A little respect goes a long way with old houses. Most people think I'm being whimsical or eccentric. The quirky architect with odd ideas about buildings having feelings. But if you understand, those who believe that houses can have souls, that architecture can hold consciousness, that buildings can be more than the sum of their materials, those people get it. Those people wave to 427 as they walk by. And if you're paying attention, if you're watching carefully, you might notice that the house seems a little brighter on days when people acknowledge it. The paint looks fresher. The porch stands straighter. The windows shine clearer. It's subtle, probably just perception, but I know the truth. Vincent responds to acknowledgement. He's sustained by it. Not in the desperate, hungry way he once was, but in a healthy, sustainable way. Like a plant that gets just enough water and sunlight to thrive without being overwhelmed, Patricia Reeves visits sometimes. She moved away after her captivity, needed distance from the memories, but she comes back annually, on the anniversary of her release. To stand on my porch and look at 427, thank you, she says each time. For negotiating, for getting us out, for understanding that it wasn't evil, just lonely. Thank you for trusting me, I reply. For believing there was another way besides running or fighting. We stand together, two people who've been inside 427 and emerged changed but intact. We understand what others can't, that sometimes the most frightening things just need to be heard, seen, acknowledged, that terror often masks pain, that monsters are sometimes just the misunderstood, because Vincent Mercer is still there, trapped between life and death, bound to the structure he chose over mortality. The ritual he performed in 1968, found in his journals, now archived with the Historical Society, was powerful enough to bind his consciousness to wood and plaster and stone. It can't be undone, not without destroying the house entirely. And neither of us want that. Vincent is part of Maple Drive now, part of its character, its history, its soul, and he's content with that. Not happy. Happiness requires a depth of experience he no longer has, but content. At peace, no longer fighting against his fate, but accepting it, making the best of an impossible situation. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep and stand at my window looking out at the dark street, I see a figure standing in one of 427's windows. An old man, transparent and faint, but smiling. He raises a hand in greeting. I raise mine in return. Two neighbors, separated by death and a street, but connected by respect and acknowledgement and the simple act of being seen, we watch each other. Not with hunger or fear, but with understanding. He watches me live my life, renovate my house, work on new projects, grow older, build a home. I watch him maintain his vigil, protect the neighborhood, stand as a monument, exist in that strange space between life and death. Then he fades, and the house is just a house again. Until the next time, until the next moment of connection. Some might call that haunted. Others might call it cursed. But I know better. I call it home. Both houses, 428 where I live, and 427 where Vincent remains. Both part of the same story, the same neighborhood, the same understanding that buildings are more than shelter. They're repositories of memory, witnesses to life, silent partners in the human experience. The house across the street was watching me back, and I was watching it. Not in horror or fear, but in understanding and respect. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough. The end.